Dan Rubenstein, my man, welcome back to the Solid Verbal Podcast. How goes it today?
It's great, Ty. It's great. I got some exercise this morning. I got a little sweat in. I'm feeling ready for this episode. It always feels like too long since we last spoke when I have to spend weekends with my family instead of with you.
Don't make it sound like it's a chore when I have to spend weekends with my family.
You can interpret my tone however. No, I love my family dearly. But it does feel weird now that we're in the off season because my week is usually 7 straight days of in some way planning with or speaking with you on or off camera, microphone, and then I don't do it between Thursday and Monday. It's a little bit different for me. I'm still getting used to it. I have leftover thoughts on Taylon Green that need to somehow get out some way. And here we are.
I had a moment on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
True story. As you were recording this on Monday, yesterday, where Solid Wife Kate, still a bit under the weather, was upstairs. Mm-hmm. I was downstairs in the kitchen, sitting at our round table, just sort of looking aimlessly at the walls. What am I supposed to do? We're so used to being in this mode of following the games and talking about the games and doing the work that we've been doing on Sundays that, there is a little bit of a void there. But alas.
Did you do something crazy? Did you buy a motorcycle? What'd you do?
I just stared at the walls. I had another cup of tea is basically what I did.
God,
and I
Ty.
chased my puppy around the house. But alas, we are back.
Yeah.
I am Ty. He is Dan. The podcast rolls on. On today's episode, we've got news that we did not have a chance to address when some of it broke a week ago, in some cases longer than a week ago. We also are going to give you the newest rendition of the Verbies, which we have not done in a couple years. It is not going to be the same version of our award show that we've done in the past, but you and I put our heads together. We've got a bunch of new categories. We've got some of the old sounds, not all of them.
You know what this is going to be? Did you have a round table pizza, Ty? Is that it? Because you said you were sitting at your round table staring at the wall. Do you know what round table pizza is?
I do.
So that's where we always used to have our like Little League and Pee Wee basketball, whatever banquets. I wouldn't say this is an award show nearly as much as it is a thoughtful coach coming up with unique names for trophies so that
That's
only
right.
one. You know what? Darren can get a trophy. Darren was Mr. Energy. He was supportive on the bench. So it's a very specific award show, and it's a very unique award show so that we can give as many different teams and players and situations their due as they pour over average pepperoni pizza, asking their moms for quarters so they could play super off-road.
That sounds right.
Uh-huh.
It's basically a bunch of participation trophies with creative names.
Exactly right.
Is what we're talking about here as we, I guess, squeeze the last few drops out of the season that was in college football. So news, Verbies. Don't forget to go to verballers.com. That is our Patreon where you can go and support. If you're new here, hello, I'm Ty. He's Dan. Welcome. We appreciate having you with us. We'll be with you all off season long. We are a great podcast to listen to on the way into work, doing chores, at the gym. We fit nicely into the tiny crevasses of your life. Talking a little bit more college football. All right. With all that being said, Dan, let's talk about the news. A couple things that we did not address. I think the most notable of which is this news now that just came out this weekend. Chip Kelly leaving, going back to the NFL, not as a head coach.
No.
Joining up with Pete Carroll, the new coach of the, I have to make sure I get this right, Las Vegas Raiders.
Correct.
I'm an old.
Yeah.
The Las Vegas Raiders hired Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll now has in turn hired Chip Kelly, which means Ohio State looking for 2 new coordinators, Dan. They lose Chip Kelly. We will talk about Jim Knowles momentarily as he decided that he was going to go elsewhere as well. It's interesting. You see this, I think, across pro sports when there is a big season for a team. That team tends to lose coaches. They tend to lose players, free agency. This is not exactly that, but
Right.
Ryan Day's got a little bit of rebuilding to do on his staff, to say the least.
Yes, and Chip Kelly gets to continue a life of not having to recruit. That's the big win here. Chip Kelly, first of all, his journey. If we can sidebar this and the connection Chip Kelly has to Pete Carroll, given their overlapping time, both as Chip Kelly offensive coordinator for Oregon and head coach. I think they briefly overlapped. The 2009 season USC went up to Oregon in a blackout, and Jeremiah Masoli just absolutely ran roughshod on the USC defense. And Rick Neuheisel then said Chip Kelly drove Pete Carroll out of college football after that game. He was like, I don't want to defend this anymore. I'm done with this garbage. I'm almost positive it was Rick Neuheisel. I apologize if I'm getting that author incorrect. And so they had their overlap. Of course, Chip Kelly goes to UCLA and, rival of USC and Pete Carroll. And I think I saw someone on, I don't have TikTok, but maybe somebody posted on some platform where somebody posted a video. It was like, I'm pretty sure my professor just got hired to be the head coach of the Raiders.
Oh, I saw that. I did see that.
Pete Carroll has like some sort of emeritus role at USC where he teaches something. I'm sure it's some kind of leadership, whatever.
Leadership or something.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I appreciated that. And Chip Kelly's journey just in general, and I say all of the following in kind of admitted reverence because he's my favorite Oregon coach ever, because I've never been happier watching Oregon football than I was when Chip Kelly was coach, and it was so fun in the system and everything. Being a great coach, kind of working out with the Eagles until it didn't work out with the Eagles, definitely not working out with the 49ers, going to ESPN for a year where he was like kind of awkwardly on TV, but in a way kind of lovable to me at the time, and then going to UCLA, kind of not figuring it out, not recruiting at all, openly warring with UCLA boosters, not having any interest in recruiting, just bringing in a bunch of MAC transfers. Like he's got a defensive line full of North Texas transfers, deciding to leave and demote himself from head coach at a power program to offensive coordinator at a power program, wins a national championship without recruiting a single player to that team, planning and executing the worst and most embarrassing rivalry loss of the season, arguably, with Ohio State losing to Michigan in the manner in which they lost, completely redeeming himself and calling an incredible offensive stretch and helping to lead Ohio State to a national championship, and then somehow convincing Al Davis's Nepo kid owner to pay him triple what any other coordinator in the NFL is making. I have nothing but respect. And I don't even say that in any sort of like glib, like wiseacre kind of way. I don't know how he's pulled all of this off, but kudos for making convincing Tom Brady and Mark Davis, the guy with the weird haircut, right?
Yeah,
to pay him $6 million.
What's with the hair? That hair thing, I can't get past it.
It's great.
I just can't. I don't get it.
$6 million. Hopefully that number is incorrect. Hopefully that was some sort of incorrect text that just got amplified. $6 million to call plays for the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, come on. Like, that almost seems jokey. Like his agent held his hand up to the receiver or the speaker on the phone and be like, I don't think he's countering. I don't think Davis is going to, we just threw that out there as like kind of a goof to see like where the negotiation would go. And they just said, okay,
we'll take it.
And
we'll take it.
So he's now off to Vegas. What a ride.
Success/progress, not always linear.
Yeah.
As you like to say. And yeah, Chip has taken the road less traveled to an extent to find himself back in the NFL.
Yeah.
I have not seen much in the way of rumors for where Ohio State goes next, but Ohio State is looking for two coordinators that after Jim Knowles had decided earlier that he is going to go to Penn State.
Yeah.
Now, Jim Knowles is a Philly guy, grew up in Northeast Philly, talked a little bit about how he wanted to go to Penn State as a player, was not good enough as a player, but through hard work and through a couple different stops, and most importantly, the players at those stops, was able to get this opportunity to go to State College and coordinate the defense for James Franklin. He is also getting a ton of money, about $3 million and change per year, the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football. This, I guess, after a bit of a bidding war, obviously Ohio State was in the Jim Knowles business. It sounds like Penn State was in it very early, soon after their season ended. Oklahoma was chomping at the bit to bring him down to Norman. That did not work out. And Notre Dame got in the game late as well.
Did they? Oh, nice.
After Al Golden. Yeah, they sniffed around after Al Golden decided he wanted to go to the NFL and coordinate defense for the Bengals. I'll talk about Notre Dame's situation in just a few moments, but alas, Jim Knowles ends up at Penn State. Again, have not heard which direction Ohio State's going to go, but that's something we're going to have to track here whenever news becomes available. As for the hire for Penn State, how can you go wrong? It's hard not to like bringing Jim Knowles to State College, given their pedigree for defense, given what we know of Jim Knowles. Look, the guy knows how to coach defense. He knows how to coach defense. He should fit in very well with the mantra of the aggressive attacking defense that Penn State likes to play. We obviously know that James Franklin has done a really good job coordinating things on the defensive side of the ball. And to my knowledge, it sounds like they're retaining some other guys on the staff that were instrumental in keeping that defense at an elite level.
Anthony Poindexter.
Yeah. Poindexter, just as one example. So a bit of a coup, frankly, for James Franklin to bring in Knowles and keep that defense operating at a really high level. It's a lot of money. And I know you tweeted out something in the immediate aftermath of this news that, well, it's great that they got him, but can he also coach receivers and teach them how to get open? No.
I said, is he also a shifty, physical downfield threat? Can he play receiver?
Same difference.
Yeah.
Same difference. And yeah, I wouldn't mind if they went out and they made a splash in the portal. I don't know if anybody's left, but maybe they can lure somebody away with a lot of money.
Sure.
I'm not overly optimistic about that. There's been a lot of attrition in that receiver room here since the end of the season for Penn State, but it does start with defense with the way that they build that program.
That's totally true.
And Jim Knowles is going to have an opportunity to take the next step with Penn State. So we'll see where that goes. I did mention that Notre Dame was in the Jim Knowles conversation for a moment in time. They have since elected to go with Chris Ash. Remember that name, Chris Ash? Dan?
Yeah, he of Rutgers head coach, obviously coached defenses at, I think, both Texas and Ohio State relatively recently.
I'm not crazy about this hire.
Okay.
I'm not crazy about the Chris Ash hire. Now, my understanding is he's co-DC alongside my guy Mike Mickens.
Okay.
Mike Mickens is still going to be very much part of this defensive staff. So at least there will also be some continuity on the Notre Dame side, as there was just a moment ago here in talking about Penn State. I don't mind that. I guess my trepidation with Chris Ash is whenever like your greatest accomplishments were about a decade ago, or however long it's been since he was coaching high-level defense at a place like Ohio State, that to me is cause for pause.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean he doesn't know what he's doing, but I would like more in the way of current accomplishments to feel truly good about this hire. Now, that being said, Notre Dame also has a ton of talent on defense. They also have a fair amount of continuity. They've continued to recruit at a really high level defensively. So I would expect that all the tools will be there for Chris Ash or Mike Mickens to help this defense stay at or near where it's been. But forgive me if I'm a bit skeptical of this one. It did feel like a bit of a come down after some of the other names that kicked about.
You probably could say the same thing about Al Golden, that he hadn't been accomplishing a ton. That was super public. I think Chris Ash has been in the NFL a little bit in various roles, and Al Golden, I think, dipped his toe into that, unless I'm conflating him with somebody else. That like, hey, if Marcus Freeman is this savvy hirer and defensive mind, and I'm sure there's a Notre Dame defense, it's not just like, here are the keys, Chris Ash, throw out everything that we did successfully last year and do your own thing. So I'm sure it's going to be fine.
Yeah, famous last words.
We'll see. Fine. Yeah,
we'll see how it goes. Chris Ash is going to be helping coach defense at Notre Dame. This left a bit of a void at Oklahoma.
Yeah,
not so much the Chris Ash hire, but the Jim Knowles one that I talked about a moment ago. I'm not sure what they're doing. Brent Venables is going to call the defense, which I guess is probably the best news if you're an Oklahoma fan, because Brent Venables does know how to coach defense. But they hired Wes Goodwin, who was just fired at Clemson. They also bring in Arkansas State Nate Dreiling, who is going to serve in some capacity. What exactly is like the formula that they are going with on defense? I'm trying to work this out.
Is Venables taking full control?
Venables is taking control, but they also beefed up the staff with Goodwin and Dreiling as well. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, that's what it sounds like, that they will be co-DCs in some respect, and they'll help game plan, but it's going to be the Brent Venables defense that he'll be calling while at the same time overseeing a massive program and hoping to get things turned around with obviously a new offensive coordinator, new transfer quarterback at the same time, hopefully a lot more health on offense, but they've recruited defense like crazy these past few years. So trying to get away from being a half team, that the defense has done more than enough recently that it's now, to me, I'm not concerned about the defense. I'm concerned about scoring points, more points than the team they're playing.
I think that's the issue. And they have recruited at a really high level. Like
they were like a top 15 national defense last year.
There aren't a whole lot of excuses
that
are left. I suppose you could make the excuse that going into the SEC has made for tougher sledding, and we knew that coming into the year. That's not a new thing.
Right.
However, this is a results-oriented business, and you got to score points.
Yeah.
And they were just bad at doing that. Defensively, I don't have the same amount of concerns as I do on offense, but they got to get it going on offense. Otherwise, I don't know. I don't know if they would part ways with Venables, but it feels like there is a world in which that could happen sooner than later if the offense isn't back on the tracks.
Weirdly enough, there is a little bit of symmetry when I think about where Oklahoma's been these past few years with the Will Muschamp South Carolina experience, where you're just like, as soon as they figure out defense, offense falls off a cliff. They put a lot of energy into offense, defense falls off a cliff. There's that Will Muschamp as like the hot defensive coordinator name to be a new head coach. And obviously that wasn't his first opportunity as a head coach at South Carolina, but for Brent Venables, that's been like, hire Jeff Lebby. The offense wasn't huge issues when people didn't have huge issues when quarterbacks were healthy, and Dylan Gabriel was obviously very good for them. And, they just didn't have the bodies on defense. And when they would get injured on offense, the whole thing would fall apart. And now the defense seems fine. Offense was one of the 20, 25 worst offenses in America last year, a lot of which was due to injuries and a crazy amount of youth that was sort of forced into action. But 2025 with news like this feels put up or shut up kind of thing for Venables with Dan? Oklahoma.
Have you looked at their schedule?
I don't have it in front of me, so no.
I have it in front of me.
Please.
Okay. I looked at this schedule last night when we were starting to put some of this together. And, after the last week of September, there are very few, if any, breaks. There's a Kent State game the first week of October. Here's the way this thing shakes out. Okay. First game of the year is Illinois State, whatever. Then throughout the month of September, they've got a home game against Michigan. They're at Temple, another home game against Auburn. Both Michigan and Auburn should be improved.
One of them definitely will be improved.
One of them definitely will be better.
Yeah.
Okay. Then as we go into October, after the Kent State game, after a bye, October 11th, that's Red River against Texas. Texas, one of the favorites, I think, to win the national championship next year. It's a little bit early to start doing that, but Texas has to be in that conversation
in early February. Yeah.
After Red River, on the road at South Carolina, which could be potentially a top 10 team in the preseason.
Some big losses, by the way, for South Carolina.
Big losses, but should be a good team.
Yep.
Then come back home a week later against Ole Miss. Ole Miss loses some talent as well, but still plenty of talent on hand.
Yeah.
Then after that, on the road against Tennessee before a bye week. Those are 4 monster games through middle October, first week of November. Then after that bye, at Alabama, home against Mizzou, home against LSU. So I guess the counterpoint is, there are games at home against some of the toughest on this schedule. Against Michigan, against Auburn early in the year, against Ole Miss, against LSU. I don't know what state Mizzou will be in. So if you're a season ticket holder and you're planning on going to games in Norman, good on you.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get to see some ammo there. But also, this is a murderer's row. This is an absolute murderer's row. This is a team that went to a bowl game, of course, lost the bowl game, finished with a 6-7 mark. I don't know, based on the schedule alone, if I am projecting that big of a jump forward. It just seems like a stretch to me with some of the teams on this schedule. Maybe I'm wrong, but in the absence of offense, It seems like a huge assumption to me that they're just going to take this mammoth step forward, especially against the schedule. I don't know what to make of that, but just something to keep in the back of your mind. If the talk coming into this year was Oklahoma's schedule, that's again going to be the circumstance for the Sooners.
Can I give a counterpoint to the counterpoint?
Yeah, sure. I have to get this through my head first, but continue.
Well, you said counterpoint, so I just wanted to offer maybe an additional counterpoint as well.
Go ahead.
We talk about schedules, especially in these like ballooningly large conferences and ACC, Big 10, Big 12, SEC, everything like that. You're just like, man, they got this team. They got that team. Mathematically, all of these teams can't be 10-2.
No.
So combined with the like most teams have like very difficult schedules as compared to previous iterations of these conferences, that in the portal era, in the NIL era, in the like, I think I'm going to take a red shirt at this point in the season era, like 2 or 3 of these teams might just be catastrophically bad out of nowhere. Like we looked at Florida's schedule last year and we were like, and on top of all of that, they have to finish with Florida State. And then that shifted into, well, at least they get Florida State to finish out the year. Because like, you don't know, if portal goes wrong and these players don't care about playing for each other, or they were misevaluated and they were all thrown into this situation, they just like are looking to improve their draft tape or whatever, that like, yeah, there's going to be a team that we are thinking is 8-4-ish that's going to look like Kentucky from last year. And we included Kentucky in talking about some of these teams' crazy schedules last year. Like, you got to go to Kentucky, and that's not always easy. And then Kentucky goes, 1 and whatever in the SEC last year.
Brutal.
So
we'll talk about them when we get to the Verbie segment of the show.
That's the only thing. Is like I hesitate right now, and I did this too. I sent you a list of what Arkansas' schedule looks like. Like, I don't know. LSU might completely fall off, and Brian Kelly could get fired in mid-October, and you're just like, well, I didn't see that coming. But that's kind of the reality now, that there is just going to be 2.5 more teams who are capable of looking like garbage for a month and a half than I think we're used to. And so if Oklahoma does kind of have its act together, that's even better, because the collapse is basically unavoidable. Everybody's going to see it, and you just hope you can minimize the damage.
Man, can you imagine if Oklahoma doesn't get the offense on the tracks for that week 2 game at home against Michigan? Talk about a rock fight. Oh, my God.
If
Michigan
neither of these teams do? Yeah.
Michigan may not have their offense on the tracks by then either. I don't know if it's going to be Bryce Underwood or a Mikey Keene sort of spot start until Bryce is ready, but that could be a defensive showdown.
Like 2 59-year-old boxers that are broke, that were famous, and are just throwing very sluggish jabs at each other.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's what that's going to be.
Okay.
All right. I mentioned Alabama. Ryan Grubb is coming back.
Hey, good.
Maybe the worst kept secret, but Ryan Grubbs, who took a year in the NFL after Kalen DeBoer left Washington. There were rumors when he left Washington that he was going to bring Grubb with him, but Grubb tried on the NFL. Did not work. Now Ryan Grubb is coming back to coach offense for Alabama. I think that is fabulous news if you are an Alabama fan. I am not sure what their quarterback situation is going to look
Got
like.
Big 5-star coming in. Yeah.
Jalen Milroe going to the NFL. Seemingly it's going to be Kalen DeBoer's guy, whoever that is, running that system. You won't have to retrofit anything to Jalen Milroe's skill set, but Ryan Grubb coming there to Tuscaloosa to be with him, I think, is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of the Tide.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of Oklahoma, I guess, just don't lose games like that. Don't lose games the way that they did to Vandy. I mean, I'm okay with it. I was very entertained by that game, but they're not far off. But it is, it is going to take a little bit more in terms of getting this system in place, beefing up the offensive line. But in terms of attracting skill talent and quarterbacks, especially given Kalen DeBoer's recent history with quarterbacks, they should be in a good place. I'm not terribly concerned for Alabama, other than it's just harder than it's ever been to be Alabama in 2025 and beyond.
Well, and you talk about the schedule that Oklahoma has in front of them. Mm-hmm. Alabama opens up its season on the road at Florida State. Who knows what to expect out of Florida State? They've got to be better than they were a year ago. Also on this schedule, at Georgia, end of September. They're at Mizzou, They are home this year against Tennessee. They are at South Carolina. They are home against LSU. They are home against Oklahoma. They are on the road for the Iron Bowl against Auburn last week of the season. So not to say any of these SEC schedules are going to be little sisters of the poor, right? We're going to have a gauntlet no matter which team we're looking at here. But this is
usually a friendly week in November, though.
There's an Eastern Illinois game in here, yes.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's going to be a slog to get through this, and without knowing who the quarterback is and how they're going to replace some of what they're losing, remains to be seen. But I feel good about that Ryan Grubb hire. I do.
Seems good. Yeah, absolutely. He's been with on and off, I think, for a long time with Kalen DeBoer.
Did you see that Nebraska is canceling its spring game?
I saw likely canceling. Yeah.
They're canceling their spring game because of fear of tampering. Matt Rule says that they don't want the game, at a minimum, to be televised, if there is a game at all, because they don't want to give rival schools an opportunity to see what they have and to potentially lure those players into the transfer portal. Dan.
Yes.
Is this justified? Is this smart? Is this typical coach paranoia? Is this a new trend in college football? What are your thoughts on this, if you have any?
First of all, I love the idea of not televising it. I love the idea of having the game but not televising. And not that Nebraska has any sort of issue getting people energetic about Big Red football, but really making like the spring game a hot ticket, as it's the only way you can see it. I think I like that. We're talking about a program that lost 5 of 6 in the middle of last year, right?
That's right.
Not to say they don't have good players. A lot of good players on not so good teams or average teams or okay at times teams, whatever. But I don't know. He's the one inside the program that if he feels like this is the only way people are going to be able to keep, or if he feels like this is the only way the roster is going to be able to stay together, that's a pretty huge issue, I guess. But I don't know. It's just a very odd story that
this is a
overthinking
pinstripe bowl winning roster, Dan. Bear in mind.
This is true. They scored nearly 21 points, right?
Almost. Yeah. Almost got to 21 on a muddy day at Yankee Stadium against Boston College. But this is the Bad Boy Mowers pinstripe bowl championship team right here.
Yeah. So you got to, I don't know, man. If it doesn't project a lot of confidence in like the Nebraska experience. They're like, well, once a player gets an offer to leave Lincoln, like how could you refuse? It doesn't sell Nebraska football, like the confidence of like once you're here, you're gonna love it so much.
Right.
It doesn't project confidence in like the strength of Nebraska football, and so I don't love that aspect to it. But I mean, I wouldn't say I'm high on Nebraska football at the moment, but I'm open to being high on Nebraska football.
I am open to being high. Yeah.
Couldn't you put that? Let's get that on the posters for the Nebraska football. People are open to being high on the Huskers. You
well,
can
now that they
me.
went to and won a bowl game,
finally,
we need to like recalibrate going into 25.
Yes, it was not a pretty product, I would say, for a big swath of 2024. But yeah, if people are getting eyes on this outside linebacker or this left guard, this wide receiver, that the lure of going literally anywhere else is going to be too strong. It doesn't project a lot of confidence.
It does not. It certainly does not. This is a program under Matt Rule that I think has been somewhat aggressive, not just in getting a guy like a Dylan Raiola to flip his commitment in and come up there, but I'm looking at some of these guys that they brought over in the portal. They've been pretty deliberate about trying to beef up that roster.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I don't know. We'll see what comes of it. But Matt Rule says no soup for you. Not going to put that game on TV if they have it at all.
This was the 124th most explosive passing offense from 2024. Continue.
The only other thing that I have here is, per some betting markets, we have a new Heisman favorite going into 2025.
Who do we have?
Arch Manning.
Okay.
Arch Manning has played in very limited action, took over for Quinn Ewers on a few occasions due to injury, but otherwise definitely is not a full-time starter. But Arch Manning getting some preseason hype. I would not touch those odds with a 10-foot pole. I don't know what they are, but if he's the favorite, those are the lowest odds. I'd put my money on somebody else. I wouldn't even touch him.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Arch is going to be good. He's got the pedigree. But look elsewhere. Go Nico, go Garrett Nussmeier, go Jeremiah Smith. Seems like Jeremiah Smith was pretty low. Your guy Dante Moore was low as well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pick Arch. I just wouldn't pick Arch.
The numbers aren't there yet. Wait for Arch to have like an average game early and see those numbers drop a little bit and then pounce on it with the hopes that he shows out in a big SEC game. Okay.
If you're into Heisman betting.
Heisman betting.
I hate the Heisman in general, so I'm not going to be betting.
I saw he just signed a big NIL deal.
Okay.
So I want to say it's Red Bull, but now I'm talking myself into intentionally mislabeling NIL deals and just all throughout the season saying Arch Manning getting that Monster Energy money and just improperly associating him with a brand that's not paying him.
Brands love that. They
love that. So good on you, Arch, for getting that Monster Energy cash.
They all tell the sponsors tell us, please use somebody else's brand in place of ours.
Yes, that's what they love. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. It's February. These things fluctuate. Should we go elsewhere?
I'm ready to do some Verbies if you are, Dan.
I am, yes.
So it's been a minute since we did this. Previously, we put this to a Verballer-wide community vote.
Yes.
We had a bunch of categories. We had a bunch of nominees. You submitted the nominees. We put the vote in front of you. And then after that, we announced the winner. We have not done this in a while. Frankly, we just decided to do this on Friday. So, bit of a shotgun Verbies here. But alas, Dan, it's time to do it. Did not bring my tux this time. And not going to do the full Radio City Music Hall production that I talked about back in 2017, I want to say.
Okay.
Been a minute since we did these, but we have new categories. As you said before, it's going to be, I think, a friendly conversation.
I mean, this is my season-ending pizza party, my banquet, my round table pizza banquet. Yeah. I like the music, Ty.
And pump it up.
Okay. All right.
All right. So the way this works is we have a bunch of very specifically named awards. We can start off with an old favorite if you like. I do have a sound for this one.
Random factoid that may only interest Tom Hammond of the year.
This is one of my favorites back in the day, the random factoid that may only interest Tom Hammond of the year. The origin story of this one, this goes way back. I'm showing my age here and the reason for these grays in the temple. But back in the day when Tom Hammond was calling Notre Dame games, he had this horrible habit of dropping in the random factoid about the player, the coach, the team, etc., at the worst possible time. And I recall, I don't remember who the game was specifically against, but it happened on multiple occasions where it'd be a big play coming up, a fourth down conversion, something of that nature, in the fourth quarter with the game on the line or maybe a little too close for comfort. And Tom Hammond would pick that exact moment to mention a guy's GPA.
Yes, of course.
Something that had no bearing on anything, and it was completely innocuous.
Sociology major, Doug. Yeah.
Sociology. But it just, Doug, don't even go me start on Doug. But Tom Hammond would do that. And for whatever reason, it drove me crazy, and that was the origin story behind this award, the random factoid that may only interest Tom Hammond of the year. I think we had a runaway winner this year.
Oh, okay.
The runaway winner was that Ryan Williams is just 17 years old.
Yes, he was. And still is.
What was that? What was that sound?
That's my okay, this is the winner, and they're walking down the aisle to accept the award. Ryan Williams is Alabama freshman wide receiver. Yeah.
Ryan Williams, we looked this up before we hit go. He will be 17 for about 5 more days.
Mm-hmm.
Still started the year only 17 years old. Everybody talked about it.
Mm-hmm.
There was a point in the season where people stopped talking about it. And I wondered, is that because he turned 18? Nope. Still 17.
I think it's because Jeremiah Smith was very clearly the better freshman receiver. And so it wasn't as exciting. Yeah.
Interestingly, though, in about 2 years, whenever it is, 3 years from now, when Ryan Williams inevitably goes pro after his junior year, he will be like 20 years old in 3 months when he is drafted into the league. which is a really young prospect, a really good prospect. He and Jeremiah Smith are going to rule that draft along with my guy Leonard Moore. But alas, Ryan Williams being just 17 years old was the random factoid that all of the announcers leaned on this year.
Agree.
They were incredulous to this fact. We were incredulous to this fact. He definitely does not play like a 17-year-old. Full stop.
By the way, the other item that I would have accepted would have been that Miami tight end who started his career at Oregon in his 9th season.
His 9th year.
That would have been the other side of it. That like anytime he had a catch, that like, oh yeah, this guy is 27, folks. He is technically a dentist. Yeah.
I wanted to find something a little bit more afield, not something that was quite so mainstream as Ryan Williams being just 17 years old. But that was such a theme in the early part of the season.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it would almost be remiss to not mention him as part of this award here, the random factoid that mainly interests Tom Hammond of the year. So Ryan Williams being just 17 years old on the board here with our first Verbie.
By the way, it was Cam McCormick was the tight end for Miami. I mean, it's a lot it's the reverse. Was it Chris Wenke who was like 26 and had played minor league baseball? There's like that guy, but in reverse, they're like, he should be at his prom. He should be studying for the SATs. He should be making out.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of that. That's fine.
So that's our first one of the day. We also have another one that I wanted to bring out of retirement, if only because we had so much fun talking about it back in the day. And we still talk about it on the show. Half team of the year, Dan.
Oh, yeah. My favorite.
Half team of the year. So half team of the year goes to the team that is either very good on offense or very good on defense, but almost always really bad at the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
This one, for an eternity, has gone to Iowa.
Yeah.
And Iowa probably still has a case for this award. However, they did get better on offense.
Yeah, that's true. And for a stretch there, we had Texas Tech with Cliff Kingsbury, where they would be have 4 points a drive, both scoring and allowing. Yeah, it was great.
A lot of Big 12 teams, a lot of old school Pac-12 teams.
Sure, of course.
That have been in the running for the half team of the year. Is there a half team of the year that comes to mind for you? I jotted one down here for me that I think is my winner, just because they were like fun to watch and follow. Is there one that jumps out to you other than my Syracuse Orange?
I think the argument could be made for Oklahoma. They finished, I think, in the top 15 and bottom 15 offensively and defensively. I'm trying to think who else had a crazy good, because if it wasn't an Iowa situation, who else had like a crazy prolific offense? And you mentioned Syracuse, and was a disaster on defense. I'd have to look it up. Nothing off the top of my mind. Who do you have?
Well, Syracuse is the answer for me.
Okay.
I think the answer is Syracuse. And the reason that I picked Syracuse is because they were fun, man. This is a fun team to chart this year.
Yeah.
This is a team that ended up with 10 wins after the bowl game over Washington State in the Holiday Bowl. But I believe per some of the advanced metrics had like the best offense in the country. It was a really good offense. Kyle McCord led the nation in passing.
Yeah.
The Franimal came in there and was able to do some work on offense. Defense needs to make some progress. A lot of games here I'm looking through. A lot of games where opponents are getting into the 30s. Something of that nature, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Went to overtime. You remember that big game first half of the season? It was like a Friday night game out against UNLV. They won that one in OT. That was a fun game, 44-41. But this is a team that didn't play a whole lot of defense, despite the fact that the Franimals got a little bit of a defensive pedigree. But brought in Kyle McCord, got the most out of him, and ultimately wins 10 games. So a fun half team, unlike some of the ones we've talked about in the past that were centered mostly around defense. You know, at least these guys were scoring points.
The number one offense in America also had the number 80 defense in terms of half teams, Ty. Do you know who that is?
Yeah.
Who?
Go ahead.
Miami.
Yeah, Miami. Miami's another one that I was about to call out as well.
Miami and New Mexico had the number 10 offense and number 127 defense.
You can make the case for Miami here as a half team.
Miami Well, you can, but how many points did they score on offense against Georgia Tech in the game that ultimately kept them out of something bigger? It's like 23, 24 points.
Yeah, Miami lost that game 28-23.
Yeah, there you go. So ultimately it didn't matter that much. But yes, that was the rub on Miami. That a couple more stops, and we're probably talking about a different hurricane season. All right.
Give me some of your awards that you conjured up for this.
Oh, you don't want this. I went completely insane. Okay. I don't know how often I can play this, but it's going to happen, Ty. I have the Pigeon Pose Award. Do you know what a pigeon pose is?
I think so.
It's a great stretch. You sort of lean forward on the ground, facing the ground, and you bring one leg up and kind of bend it at the knee and then bend. It stretches everything, your hips, your lower back, your glutes, whatever, your core. And I just like to honor a good stretch here. And that was the start of Pitt season.
Oh, man.
Let's not get negative. Let's not go down the road of what happened later on. But with a lot of questions surrounding, like, is Pat Narduzzi going to get this done? And we figured it was going to be Nate Yardley starting. Nate Yarnell,
Nate Yarnell, yep.
At quarterback. And Eli Holstein comes in, Des Reed. They start, was it 7-0? 7-0.
They started 7-0, Dan.
Including a sort of earthquake win over Syracuse that featured 5 interceptions, 3 of which went for pick sixes on a Thursday night, I believe. I am just going to honor that specific stretch of good vibes coming out of the Steel City.
Well, they won their first 7 and lost their last 6.
We're not talking about that, Ty. We're not talking about that. We're just honoring their first stretch.
7. They won their first 7 against Kent State, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Youngstown State, North Carolina, and Cal.
Yeah.
In addition to that Syracuse game, which they won by 28 points. And then starting in November, it all came off the skids. At SMU, loss.
Yeah.
Home against Virginia, loss. Home against Clemson, close loss.
Yeah.
On the road at Louisville, got destroyed, 37-9. On the road at Boston College, lost their last game of the regular season, 34-23. And then lost in overtime, 6 overtimes to be exact, in the bowl game against Toledo. So it was a great start. Definitely a bit of a limp to the finish for Pat Narduzzi.
I have, as I'm going through here, so I have the Man versus Food Big Eater Award.
Okay.
Alonzo Barnett against James Madison. Or excuse me, Alonzo Barnett on James Madison, quarterback
against
versus
North Carolina.
Yeah.
Had 5 passing and 2 rushing touchdowns in that game.
Yes. I think about 500-ish total yards. 388
Crazy.
through the air and another 100-ish on the ground. Just a ridiculous performance. They dropped 70. James Madison, new coach. North Carolina about to have a new coach. In no small part because of allowing James Madison to score 70 in a win. I love the idea of randomly going off on a team that is in a major conference that has no business allowing that many points.
What is Man versus Food?
I've
heard of Man versus Beast. I've never heard of Man versus
Man
Food.
versus Food is the show that was on, I want to say, the Travel Channel, featuring a host named Adam Richman, where he would go around the country and, they're like, oh, this steak place has a 72-ounce steak, and if you can finish it in under an hour, you get your picture on the wall.
I remember this show.
So he did different challenges.
I remember.
So he was like, can you eat 5 dozen donuts? And if you can, you become the mayor of Poughkeepsie or something. He would just do, I don't know. He would just do all of those. And it was real weird to watch. But I appreciated the effort. And so this, Alonzo Barnett, 8, man.
I just put down Ashton Ginty here. It wasn't as out of nowhere as the Alonzo Barnett game against UNC.
Yeah.
But somewhere in this stupid show, we have to call out the fact that Ashton Ginty had 6 games where he rushed for 200 or more yards this past season. Obviously, that's why he's like RB number 1 coming off the draft board this year. Had an incredible season for Boise State. Took his team into the playoffs. Wasn't able to get it done. Still had over 100 yards, by the way, against Penn State, albeit mostly on a couple runs. But Ashton Ginty, just a remarkable season. Definitely gets some sort of Big Eater award, even if it isn't in the same context as Alonzo Barnett.
I'm calling my next award. I'm pivoting here. The Tom DeLonge Award.
Where are you?
Okay.
I just missed players that were excellent that ended up in bad situations, either because of a new coach, a new system, a new quarterback, the way defenses played against them, the way offenses played against them, that guys that we assumed would be household names in 2024
Where are you?
completely disappearing from the public consciousness. And I have Teteroa McMillan from Arizona, who is going to be drafted in the first round, I think, right?
He's going to be a top 10.
Yeah, he's just ridiculous.
A top 10 pick.
Could be one of the first receivers off the board. And had the same receiver and had what seemed to be a same quarterback, a pass-friendly offense. Dino Babers had success running offenses, of course, at his stops at Bowling Green and Syracuse, Eastern Illinois. Didn't work out for Dino. Didn't work out for Brent Brennan in year one, really. Didn't work out for Noah Fafita, building on his 2023. And as a result, T-Mac had some big catches, played in 0 big games, Arizona this season. And I just missed having T-Mac in our lives in a national way. That's all.
What about Luther Burden?
Oh, I like that one too. Yeah, that was kind of a weird one because we had same coordinator, same head coach, same quarterback. Obviously, other players new and different and situations different, but he fell off in terms of
it really
production.
hurt.
Yeah,
it really hurt not having the stellar ground game the way they did the year before, and they just did not have much explosion at all with that offense.
And they weren't
Luther Burden
trying either. They weren't.
They weren't. That's the thing that I think is most frustrating. But he played in every regular season game. He opted out of the bowl, but finished with just 2 touchdowns through the air. 676 yards, 2 touchdowns as the presumptive, best receiver on this team. You recall when they got Luther Burden, who is from the state of Missouri, when they got him to come to Mizzou, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
I remember a couple of years ago when they got him, it's like, oh man, this guy is going to be like the next great thing. He's been very, very good. I think he'll be great at the next level. I don't deny the talent, but for whatever reason, they weren't able to get him the ball and get him in space this year for him to make more of an impact. It's kind of upsetting. He had over 1,000 yards the year prior,
Right.
But this year it was more of a, I think, holistic problem with the offense that he wasn't really able to get it going. Only had 1 game over 100 yards, which is kind of crazy.
Yep. The next award that I have, I'm calling the Nordberg Award. Do you remember? Okay, so pay no attention to the gentleman who played the character of Nordberg in the Naked Gun movies. But the hallmark of Nordberg is that he would always just sort of be put through the ringer in terms of injuries. He'd end up in a wheelchair, and the wheelchair would lose its brakes, and he would be shot, and he would be stabbed, and his hand would go into a pot of boiling water, and he would just stumble all over the place, just really get through the ringer. The last, few years of Jake Dickert's life in Pullman, Washington. So now current head coach of Wake Forest, but promoted after Mike Leach leaves for Starkville, and things are going pretty decently and using the portal well, brings in Cam Ward. Cam Ward leaves. John Mateer backs him up. John Mateer is now gone. Obviously, Jake Dickert now gone as well. The Pac-12 completely falls apart, and he's like a man without a country. And Wazoo just keeps on going, wins the Apple Cup in Seattle. They win the Apple Cup.
They won
the highest of highs for Wazoo after Washington is national runner-up in 2023. And, it's an exciting ending, and it's an emotional ending, and it stops, huge stops, the defense does for Wazoo. And John Mateer works out really well, but then they lose to Oregon State after, in a press conference, Jake Dickert says, we're not best buddies with Oregon State just because the two of us have left behind. They would leave us behind just like we would leave them behind. Let's not get it twisted. And then Jake Dickert left Wazoo behind. Oh, and by the way, the Wazoo athletic director left Wazoo behind for Washington. All in the span of this time. He's been through it, and now he's off to Wake Forest for some semblance of consistency, which has not been the case for Wake Forest, obviously. So, yeah, Jake Dickert gets my Nordberg Award of just constantly being put through it.
Yeah, I was trying to think if I had a better answer, but I don't think I do.
It's pretty good.
It's been a hell of a run for Jake Dickert.
I mean, I think
last 2 years.
You could select any of these quarterbacks that have been on like their 5th school in as many years.
I mean, like Tyler Van Dyke was where I was thinking.
Tyler Van Dyke's a great answer for the Nordberg Award.
Potentially for the Nordberg Award, right? Tyler Van Dyke is one. Max Johnson, I think, is another one that is maybe more of like a bargain bin TBD with respect to this award, just with respect to this award, given the injury history and all that. But it's just been like injuries and being snake bitten are unfortunately very common.
I think TJ Finley's still making his way around, right?
TJ Finley's still getting work.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Still getting work. Like he's like Richard Karn, right? Like he's like this actor who's just chugging along. Man. Yeah.
But the Jake Dickert thing of being in a conference and having all of your peers leave.
Yeah.
And then you try to keep that just is a very unique situation.
I agree.
I think he deserves a Nordberg Award.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I by the way, I love
any
time, just sidebar here on the, I don't know if it's 247 or on 3, somebody does the like, oh, this person is transferred and like they're going from North Carolina Arrow to Texas A&M, something like that. But I love when there's 4, like the lineup of 4 teams that this player has been at and they're still going. I love that graphic. Like this is the journey. This is this is not a nonstop flight. This is
they show you the full chain of custody for that player.
Yes. Like
that's only second to some of the headlines that they're putting, like the engagement farming headlines that we have at the bottom of some of the graphics that just say like Tamper. There was one for Dion that said Wood. There was one for Mario Cristobal that said bullshit at the bottom
after the Cam Ward
stuff. I'm a big fan of that. They're doing good work with that.
They're on a heater. They're doing great. But yes,
definitely the chain of custody of the players.
The chain of custody where you're like, this guy's been in 6 states in 4 years, has 3.5 families. It's great.
You have one here labeled as the Susan Boyle Where Did That Come From Award.
Correct. Yes.
I have for my answer here, Northern Illinois dreaming the dream of beating Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Back in week 2. I still don't know where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
But Northern Illinois winning that game in week 2. You have Purdue's second half against Illinois getting very specific.
Yes. Well,
staying in the Midwest, staying with an Illinois school.
Yes.
I don't remember that. What happened?
You don't remember the second half of that game?
I don't think I do.
Okay, let me pull up the box score just to be extremely specific. So Illinois was up big at halftime. They were up like 34-3. That's what my brain is telling me. 24-3 at halftime. Okay.
Okay.
Purdue makes a quarterback change. Excuse me, they don't make a quarterback change. They just decide to open things up. They weren't playing well. This is a quarterback change sort of ahead of this. Hudson Card started off the year as Purdue's starting quarterback. It's Ryan Brown. And they fully open things up. And Purdue scores in the second half and overtime 46 points.
Okay.
Yes, they scored 40 in the second half and lost in overtime. But Ryan Brown went for 300-ish yards through the air and over 100 on the ground. And they just went off. And people were like, oh, man, Purdue's changing things up. And there were stories about like, oh, this is Ryan Walters is now calling the plays on offense or something. I'm getting this timeline mixed up, I know, especially because he's a defensive guy. But there was like some change behind the scenes and somebody lost power or somebody gained power with regard to offensive play calling. And you're just like, oh, man, Illinois is pretty good. And Purdue just like almost hammered them in that second half to the tune of a win. But Illinois was able to pull it out. Luke Altmaier threw for almost like 400 yards. Pat Bryant went over 100 yards. So it like became a legit shootout when it looked like Illinois was going to win that game by 35. And so Purdue out of nowhere scored 40 in the second half against Illinois and lost 50-49. So
they could get losing effort of the year there too as well.
Absolutely could get losing effort of the year. And I remember thinking like, oh, maybe Ryan Brown in the same way that I think Arizona made a quarterback change way back when to Khalil Tate. And they were like, oh, this guy should have been starting the whole time. And we've had that, when Sam Darnold and Max Brown at USC, like, oh, this guy's the guy. and you're like, oh, maybe Ryan Brown's that guy. Ryan Brown wasn't that guy. He was that guy for that fleeting moment of sunshine for Purdue football in 2024. They won their first game, Purdue did, 49-0 against Indiana State, and lost their final 11, concluding with a 66-0 loss to Indiana in the Oak and Bucket game, the old Oak and Bucket. They lost 35-0 to Oregon, 45-0 to Ohio State. It very much was not like something that was indicative of things to come. But, once again, that fleeting moment. It's nice.
I have another
Please
sidebar here for this one. It's not exactly in the spirit of the award, but there is one highlight in particular that we barely talked about on this show.
Okay.
That came to mind. I don't know why when you put this on our doc.
Okay. What do you have?
Receiver for Oregon State, Darius Clemens.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you recall this play that I'm talking about.
I do.
They lost 34-18, something like that, to Boise State.
It was kind of Reggie Bushy at the sideline, the ability to just screech on the brakes.
So he takes what amounts to like a bubble screen or just sort of like a smoke screen, something like a very quick pass to the perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
About the 10-yard line or so, right? It wasn't that far away from the goal line. But he comes to this point where he is sort of pinned down against the sideline as he's approaching the goal line on the right side. And he just throws on the brakes, very casually throws on the brakes as two Boise State defenders just zip right past him, and he walks into the end zone. And it never got nearly enough play. But truly, if you're watching the game, it was one of those Berman whoop moments that he often does, like when he's doing his fastest 2 or 3 minutes in sports.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from? No idea. It was beautiful.
It was. The
absolutely
deceleration. I appreciate that. I'm much better at stopping than going, Ty. You ready for the next category?
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
You jotted down the Flomo 90s Pencil Case Award. You need to explain what this is. I don't know why you're playing that sound.
It fits. I don't know. Okay.
What is a Flomo 90s pencil case?
Okay. I had to look this up. There were brands in the 90s. Do you remember? So there was sort of like, it's a rectangle. It's a little bit puffy on top. It's plastic. And it was a pencil case. But there were like buttons on it and drawers on it. And
compartments, right?
Compartments. And you would flip a switch and a magnifying glass would come out. So there would be something like that, or a little pair of scissors that you could use. Everybody uses Swiss Army knife, and that's great. It was either Flomo was the brand that came up. Sanrio was another one. That it was very much like in the broader Trapper Keeper averse, where there were these just 90s like educational gadgets. Right. That were big hits. And I remember that specific pencil case being a thing at my school in 1993 or something.
So it was
a do everything
verse.
The Trapper Keeper verse. Is that how people speak English now?
I think so. I had to look this one up too because I wasn't familiar with this. The conversation taking place on Reddit between people trying to buy these out on eBay is, in the words of one Jim Rome, phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Incredible.
Yeah.
People still trying to buy this in the year of our Lord 2025. These things are ridiculous looking. From what I understand, based on the cursory research I've done, they were not cheap.
I don't even remember if I had one. I was just so impressed by them. Like,
you got to pay for those compartments somehow. That's why they're not cheap.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that this goes to, in effect, like the Swiss Army
the do everything. Yes.
Kind of guy.
Yeah.
Who do you got?
I went Tyler Warren against USC. Tyler Warren throwing that ridiculous, what was it, a double touchdown pass? He was just ridiculous. He would take snaps. He would catch balls. Like, that was sort of I don't know if it was the beginning of, but to me, that was the apex of the Tyler Warren do everything. This dude is so super crazy valuable for Penn State, who needs a player like this for creativity purposes, for first down purposes, for touchdown purposes, for gravitational, like screwing up defensive game plan purposes. If you were watching Mackey highlights, I feel like the USC game was probably, the first 3.5 clips.
I jotted down Jalen Milroe, actually.
Okay.
Jalen Milroe wasn't lining up as wide receiver, wasn't playing multiple positions. Everything ran through him, though.
Yeah.
All season long. And it became apparent, I think, towards the end of September, beginning part to middle of October, Alabama was only going to go as far as Jalen Milroe could take them. And so, again, maybe not exact one-to-one for what you're going for here, but just the way that they leaned on him, and he had to be a passer. He had to be, in some cases, in many cases, the team's leading rusher. He had to be all of these things in order to propel Alabama forward. He almost got them into the playoff. Right. He is a very good player. I'm not sure I want the Giants to draft him to play starting quarterback, but that's a whole other discussion. He definitely rose to the moment.
Are we going to do a Giants draft prep episode, though? Are we going to have that whole other discussion?
No,
are the people asking for more New York Giants content from this college football show?
I don't think they're asking for any New York Giants content. We will have our draft show with Nate Tice.
I agree.
As we get closer.
Let's be clear. Travis Hunter is the Swiss Army knife. He's like the official version of this answer.
Yes.
And then the Flomo alt version of this.
These are the poor man's versions of the Travis
Nobody
Hunter.
did more of everything than Travis Hunter.
Correct.
We've accepted that as 2024 college football canon. Now we're
it's
into
like when we retire a dude.
Right. Now we're into the pencil sharpener availability portion of the category, and Flomo's gotcha. Does Flomo exist as a company anymore? Too lazy to look it up. Who knows?
Can't tell you. Can't imagine it is. All right. We got a bunch of other ones here. Let's rifle through these as quickly as we can. The Not Like That award for worst way to end a game. We have two very, very good answers here.
Yes.
Dan.
I put down the way Texas lost their playoff game to Ohio State. Driving down the field with an opportunity to tie and fumbling it and having it be run back by Jack Sawyer for 6 the other direction. And the shock and anguish and depression and disappointment. I have felt all of these things as an Oregon fan, and even I felt like finding Texas people in my life to just deliver roses and chocolates to. Like, I am so sorry you had to watch that. Not like that, Texas. I'm so sorry.
That was a level 10 out of 10 stomach punch.
Yeah. In that specific spot with what was on the line, yes.
That was a brutal.
So not like that, Texas.
Stomach
not
punch.
Like that. Yeah.
I've got the Colorado Baylor game.
That's tough. Yeah.
So that was the one where Shador rolls out to his left, throws kind of off the short leg, against the grain, Hail Mary that is caught by LaJohntay Webster for like a 40 some odd yard touchdown. It wasn't a Hail Mary the way I think we're used to seeing a Hail Mary, which is just throw it up into the sky and hope somebody jumps up and catches it.
Right.
He threw this on a rope 40 yards, and he just happened to get open. And then what was the circumstance then? Baylor like fumbled crossing the goal line in overtime or something?
Yeah. In overtime, it was 1st and goal at the Colorado 2.
That's right.
And so Colorado scores a touchdown in the first overtime, I believe. And Baylor gets the ball to tie it. And Dominic Richardson, as he's leaping to cross the goal line for a touchdown in overtime, loses control of the ball. Game over.
Game over.
Yeah.
That's right. Oh, that was a brutal loss for Baylor.
That's real tough. Which, by the way, shout out to Baylor for keeping their season together, and one of the great kind of like comeback stories of 2024.
I agree. We've got the George Brett Hair on Fire Award.
Yep. George Brett sprinted out of the dugout when his bat was being inspected for pine tar, I believe.
Yes.
To argue.
One of the all-time great baseball clips.
Yeah. I have Shane Beamer in the bowl game with Brett Bielema losing his mind. I also have Kenny Dillingham as the end of his very poorly managed game against BYU when Sam Levitt was running around and threw the ball straight up to try and kill clock. And the field is rushed, and he's just berating officials. That's picked up by a phone.
That's the winner.
From an ASU student. I think I love the intensity. I love the moment. Obviously, there was more at stake for ASU in that moment than there was for Shane Beamer in South Carolina in their bowl game. So I have the George Brett Hair on Fire award going to Kenny Dillingham there.
I have as an honorable mention Lane Kiffin, just for his work on social media after Ole Miss did not make the playoff.
Well, that's digital rage. That's not as...
It's digital rage. It's not the same.
No.
It's not the same.
And the rage quieted down pretty quickly once it was clear that the SEC was not performing super well in the postseason this year. I have the next one, the Jeff Grimes Award for Zombie Program of the Year. Let me explain while we're on topic. Jeff Grimes has recently been at Kansas, Baylor, BYU. He was the offensive coordinator, I believe, when Zach Wilson was excellent at BYU. He leaves, they're bad, but eventually they become good again with Jeff Grimes long gone. He goes to Baylor, it doesn't work out, he leaves. They're immediately good again on offense with Jake Spavital. They had a zombie situation in Kansas this season where things started out terribly, but then came back strong with Jeff Grimes there, mind you. And now Jeff Grimes, I think, is on to Wisconsin, I want to say. And so hopefully that means good stuff is ahead after some bad stuff for Wisconsin, because that's the Jeff Grimes experience, it appears. I also looked this up. Do you know where Jeff Grimes was before BYU? I had to look it up. I didn't remember.
No.
Jeff Grimes was at LSU for the end of the Les Miles era, which was terrible. He leaves, and immediately upon him leaving, he was there for the first year of the Ed Orgeron era, which was unremarkable. He leaves LSU. They immediately find and start Joe Burrow. And are pretty good, and then just absolute world beaters the year after. So I have this as like the zombie team of the year. That's the long-winded way of saying who's your zombie team of the year who was not good in 2023 and rose from the ashes like a phoenix. Pun intended here, because I have ASU.
All righty. I've got Ohio, actually, for my answer.
I like that. Slow start.
Very slow start. Ohio ended up winning its last 7 games. They won the MAC. They won the bowl game without their coach, Tim Albin, who left, went elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they did so all rather anonymously because they're a MAC team and because the MAC was thrown in a huge blender at points this season. We thought there could be a 6-way tie atop the conference. There wasn't, thankfully. But Ohio, the way it kept its season together and the way, especially they went on a run last 7 games of the year is pretty damn impressive.
Yeah.
So zombie program kind of left for dead early on to some extent. The way they were able to put it back together was pretty cool.
Yeah. I have here the Dikembe Mutombo Rejection Out of Nowhere Award. May he rest in peace, Dikembe Mutombo. But I just immediately associate modern shot blocking with Dikembe Mutombo. And by modern, I mean he's been retired for like 20-something years. At the end of the year, or near the end of the year, there were rumors swirling that Mac Brown was going to retire, that this was going to be it for Mac Brown at North Carolina. And Mac Brown decided one day to very clearly say, I know it's being said out there, but I plan on being back next year. And North Carolina officials said, nope, you're not. He tried to head off the story, like, let me just get ahead of this, guys. I'm going to be back in 2025. I plan on doing big things for the Heels. And his bosses said, we're firing you, Mac. We are firing you.
Right.
He tried to speak it into existence, and the Dikembe Mutombo hand from above said, not so fast.
We have a couple ones here for Tire Fire of the Year. This is another favorite.
Yeah, what do you have?
That we rolled over from previous versions of this. I mean, Florida State's the obvious one.
Of course.
Florida State was a huge, raging tire fire. They went 2-10.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody saw that coming. My sense is that we're going to need to do a full episode, a full autopsy on Florida State, in addition to some of these other teams here that we also listed under this category.
Yes.
But Florida State, that goes without saying. I mean, clearly that is the answer here. But Kentucky's in that conversation.
Okay, so here's the actual interesting thing about Kentucky to me from afar. Florida State lost their first game of the season in incredibly public fashion in Ireland to Georgia Tech, and people were looking at the schedule like, I don't know if they're going to win an FBS game.
Right.
Like, they're going to beat Charleston Southern, which I think it was Charleston Southern. They beat them. And then you look at the rest of the schedule, you're like, I don't know what else. They beat Cal. And so I guess that's how weird the season was in the ACC, that they were blessed with having Cal on the schedule.
That's right.
And Cal was okay. They weren't bad, but I don't think they scored a touchdown in that game against Florida State. Kentucky's start to the season was they lost like 13-12 to Georgia. And you're like, ooh, this Kentucky team, this might be
They're
something.
feisty. Might have a little bit of spunk
They
to them,
just held down Georgia. Georgia's coming off of 3 legitimately incredible national seasons, 2 national championships, and was obviously playoff caliber, but didn't get into the playoff in the 2023 season. And Kentucky just like completely squashed this Georgia offense. And then they go, and I think they had lost in those first few games demonstrably to Ole Miss. And you're just like, well, look, this is the SEC. This game, sometimes this happens. And then, South Carolina. I'm screwing up my team.
They lost to South Carolina.
They lost to South Carolina in not impressive fashion at all. But then they beat Ole Miss.
They beat Southern Miss.
Yes.
Very early on, first game of the year, 31-zip. Then they lose back-to-back games. They get drilled at home by South Carolina, 31-6. They lose close the following week, also at home, 13-12 against Georgia.
Yeah.
They win in resounding fashion the following week against Ohio,
MAC
future MAC champion,
yeah.
Ohio. And then's the game against Ole Miss on the road.
Ole Miss on the road, and they beat them by 3. They hold this like crazy talented Ole Miss offense with all this firepower to under 20 points. And you're just like, I don't know what Kentucky is, but they're going to be a hard out. And then they were not a hard out. The rest of the way.
They were not a hard out. No, then they end up losing 6 of their next 7 after the bye week. They lose to Vanderbilt. Yes. They lose to Florida, get drilled by Florida on the road. They lose to Auburn. They lose to Tennessee to round out, which was just, a horrible stretch of 4 games after their bye the first week of October. Mm-hmm. And then they close out the year only beating Murray State and then losing back-to-back games at Texas 31-14 and then at home for the Governor's Cup against Louisville 41-14. So another situation where there were some really impressive wins on here, or close wins, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But in the end, just a really bad season for Kentucky. They only won 1 game in conference.
I want to say there have been like 6 offensive coordinator tenures in as many years for Kentucky.
Yeah,
like rough. You don't need a nameplate on the offensive coordinator's office. Just say like assistant.
Yeah.
And so that's Kentucky right now.
I also put App State in this category for tire fire.
I think that's fine.
So I had to go back and look at my notes for App State just to see what I wrote about them, because I was really high on this team. And when we talked about the Sun Belt in particular, you and I were both really high on this team. And I recall saying, like, listen, we don't know what this new version of the Sun Belt's going to have in store, right? With new version being, roster turnover. We've got Kurt Signetti leaving. Like, there were new things that we needed to discuss about the Sun Belt, but we felt pretty good about what Sean Clark was bringing back, right? It seemed as if he had maybe his best team in his span of time there. There were persistent questions about the defense and whether they could take a step forward, because coming into this year, it was 3 straight years of regression on that side of the ball.
Yes.
And my hypothesis before the year was, well, they got to get better. They got to get better. They've got enough coming back. They got to get better. There were also questions along the offensive line, but this was a really good offense the year before. It seemed as if all the ingredients were there.
Yes.
They didn't get better on defense, I can tell you that.
No, they did not.
They got worse. They got much worse on defense. And then in terms of their offense, the line actually did hold up its end of the bargain, but this was not as good of an offense, not by a long shot, as it had been the previous season. They also turned the ball over a ton, something like 118th nationally in turnover ratio. Maybe I'm getting that wrong, but it was not good, to say the least. They were just mistake prone. They were not as good as expected. And as such, now App State's got a new coach. So definitely a missed opportunity for my money for App State this past season. Maybe not quite the degree of a tire fire as a Florida State or even a Kentucky, but in terms of letdowns, App State was up there. Definitely up there.
I have the Duff Award for sudden quarterback room incompetence.
I don't know why you're playing that sound.
I love it. It's city pop, Ty.
City pop.
Do you know what city pop is?
I do now.
It's Japanese funk jazz fusion from the early 80s.
The Duff Award.
The Duff. Okay, there was a movie that I have never seen called The Duff.
Yes.
I have no idea what it's about other than it appears to be like a high school teen, rom-com type movie. There is a scene in which the starting quarterback is shown warming up and throwing a ball, something, and has what is probably the worst form of any football actor that has ever existed on the silver screen. I did a little bit of research, and the actor is Canadian, so maybe there's something there. But like, we've had quality Canadian quarterbacks in college football, so I don't know.
There's a whole Canadian Football League.
There's a whole Canadian Football League. There's a whole Canadian football family that has won 7,000 games for Ohio University.
The Rourke family dynasty, of course.
Jesse Palmer's Canadian. There's a bunch. If you look this up, it's like a meme at this point. Look up the quarterback from the Duff. It's real tough. It's a real tough watch, Ty. You seeing this?
I'm trying to find it.
You watching? Okay. So this is an award for the worst quarterback room, inexplicably, in this sport, out of nowhere in 2024.
Right.
I have Michigan.
Yeah.
Just in terms of where they were with what they could be to roll out a Davis Warren, Jack Tuttle, Alex Orgy grouping. I felt for Michigan people. Obviously, all's well that ends well with beating Ohio State, but for the stretch of the season where they were looking like they did against, you take your pick, Illinois, Washington, Oregon, Minnesota, USC, even in winning efforts sometimes,
right?
It was real tough. Do you see the clip?
I'm watching it. This is Robbie Amell, I think.
Is that a famous person?
I know who Stephen Amell is. He was in a show that Solid Wife Kate used to watch.
Okay. So is he the Frank Stallone?
I think
Stevie Amell?
I think this is a Frank Stallone situation.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with this movie either, but what is that form?
Yeah. It's real tough. So that's the Duff Award.
Oh no.
Yeah. Just sort of flicking it with like a shot flick.
This guy has like the all-American clean-cut quarterback look to him as well.
Yeah.
And then oh no.
This is I
don't know what that's bad.
Teach your children, this is my parenting tip, take it or leave it. Teach your children to throw. I'm not saying your children need to be great athletes. I'm not saying your children need to be average athletes. But if you can at all impart throwing coordination from a young age, just like I don't golf, but I can golf. I can swing a golf club without looking like a goober. Like, I think you need to minimize, just for basic social interactions, minimize goober sports forms. Like, hey, you want to shoot some hoops? And then go out there and just are throwing it from the wrong ear, shooting it from like that kind of stuff, shooting it from the wrong, like.
He threw this football so badly, he did a hit on Rich Eisen where he had to prove that he could throw it normally.
Really?
Yeah. And honestly, this isn't good form either.
No, I assume not.
He's throwing, I mean, it's better. There's a lot of shot put in this, but at least it's a spiral coming out of his hand.
Okay.
All right. We're going to need to dig into this a little bit more.
It's real tough.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
But yes, I'm sure you've met people, you've been at like gatherings where you're like, you want to throw a football around, or like you want to throw a Frisbee, and just like, you need to teach in the schools, parents, whoever. Brutal. You got to get people, you got to get good form going early on. Again, not for necessarily athletic success, but to set up a lifetime of just being average at being able to move.
You could tell within a millisecond if somebody's learned how to throw a ball.
Yeah. That's all.
Millisecond.
Yeah.
All right. We got a few other ones here real quick.
All right, let's rifle.
Getting long in the tooth here. What else do we got? Okay. I
have the 3 Gusts of Wind Award.
3 Gusts. Oh.
So the 3 Gusts of Wind Away award is Minnesota.
Yes.
Minnesota finished the regular season, I think, with 7 wins.
That's right.
If you look at how they finished against Michigan, Penn State, and I believe North Carolina to open the season, they were like 5 or 6 points away from 10 wins, like 2.5 minutes of quality football away from double-digit wins. So I called this the anti-Peter North, not knowing how to finish.
That's right. No, absolutely.
I have that for the Gophers this year.
The McGruber in over his head award we gave to Ryan Walters and Brent Brennan.
Yeah.
Didn't work out super well for either of those guys. Ryan Walters is gone. Brent Brennan's still there. Yeah. We'll see if he can get things back on the tracks. But
a lot of cutaways of the sideline of these two coaches, not really following how things were collapsing around them.
Ryan Walters is going to be coaching defense at Washington, which I think is a good hire for Jed Fish.
Should be, yeah.
Ryan Walters was great as a defensive coordinator at Illinois before taking that job at Purdue, but for a whole multitude of reasons did not work out at Purdue, and he landed on his feet elsewhere.
Coached against some garbage Big Ten offenses at Illinois, but you know what? At Washington, he will have the opportunity to coach against some garbage Big Ten offenses. Yeah.
Speaking of coaches, this is our not coach of the year. You labeled it as the just have to be faster than the other guy award.
Yeah. I have a very specific reference. Continue.
Not coach of the year in my book. And I guess by your classification here, just having to be faster than the other guy. We both went with Mike Gundy.
Yes. Now,
Mike Gundy in my book here is the not coach of the year because
more than Norvell. I would say Norvell was worse given where they were in 2023, but I'm giving it to Gundy because Norvell attracted so much attention away as a collapsing coach.
I think that's right. I mean, to be fair, there were questions about Florida State coming into this year because they lost a lot to the draft.
I agree.
You know, you lose Jordan Travis, who was a team captain, who was there at the start of the project for Mike Norvell, and, you know, on the heels of the season that they had. It seemed to me, even though the ACC was very gettable, and we know that now, it seemed to me that there were still a fair amount of questions about Florida State. I did not have them winning the ACC. I did have Oklahoma State playing for the Big 12. And I think a lot of people did. We did a show with Scott Wright from the Oklahoman. And we talked about, if not now, when, for Mike Gundy. This is a guy who's been there forever, only actually has one conference title to his name. Been a very successful coach, but recruiting has not necessarily been the strong suit the last couple of years. You know, they're not averse to the transfer portal. They're just sort of still figuring things out. NIL is kind of a work in progress, right? But the ingredients were there this past season. They had a ton of returning production. At least on the surface, it looked like the schedule was there. This is a bad team.
Yeah.
This is a really bad team this past season. So there were talks then in the offseason, the immediate offseason, right after the year, about Gundy and, you know, was he going to stick around or not? Supposedly given an ultimatum to take a contract that he wasn't super in favor of. But, you know, I guess they settled their differences and Gundy is still going to be there moving forward. But it does not seem to me like a situation that obviously worked out well in 2024. And I'm not certain it's going to go to a better place in 2025.
Right.
So for me, the answer is Gundy.
And I think there's already, I saw the word groundwork for a succession plan in Stillwater that Mike Gundy is going to be involved with in some way. So all the new language in his new deal indicates that, like, this is going to be a bridge year, it seems, for Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy. The reason I said that, like, you just have to be faster than the other guy, it's just like, how do you outrun a bear? Is you're faster than the other guy. And Mike Gundy outran Mike Norvell in the Battle of Mikes, running away from the bear of incompetence. Mike Gundy, at least early on, won a little bit more, but did Oklahoma State, they finished winless in the Big 12.
Winless in the Big 12, yeah.
So, yes. So he was so it's the award for the faster Mike. The faster bad Mike coach in 2024. Yeah.
Look, there were questions about what kind of consistency they could get out of a guy, you know, like an Alan Bowman.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, there were fair questions, I think, about this team.
Yes.
Coming into the year. But even still, looking at the teams that were on this schedule, just in conference, right? Utah, obviously very beatable. Kansas State, one of the better teams. That game was on the road. They did end up losing that. They lost all these games. But just in looking back, even though you had a team like an Arizona State ascend late, even though you had a school like a BYU, I think, punch way above projections, or even Colorado, right? There were good teams on the schedule, but these were all gettable teams. with the returning production that they brought back this year, there was no reason for them to bottom out the way that they did. They bottomed out on offense. They bottomed out on defense. The running game went away completely. Ollie Gordon came back, didn't do anything.
Right.
They were not able to kind of tap into his skill set either. So this was just a really bad campaign for Oklahoma State. And for my money to just look at this team and say, okay, 3-9, I was projecting 9-3 at an absolute bare minimum for this team coming into the year. I'm still dumbfounded by how they did this with that roster and all that returning production.
I mean, Cowboy fans would tell you Oklahoma State is the consummate. As soon as you think they're really good,
I know
they collapse.
They've got a little bit of Auburn in them, don't they?
Right. As soon as you think that they are going to struggle this year, I just don't see how they get to a bowl. They go to the Big 12 championship game.
That's right.
They are that program right now, among others, but they might be the most pronounced version of that in this moment.
Why don't we close this one out, Dan?
Got a couple more. Which one are you going to go to?
I was going to say with an old favorite here.
Okay.
We talk a lot about gumpy teams.
Oh, yes, of course.
You jotted down the gumpiest gumps.
The gumpiest gumps that ever gumped, and that's not an insult. It's a reference to the fact that Forrest Gump found himself at various historic moments in time, whether it was on the National Mall, whether it was meeting presidents, whether it was in wars, whether it was investing in Apple, I believe. That it was just Forrest Gump found himself in the crosshairs of history, Ty. And so who is that team that keeps appearing in big moments of the 2024 season? I had Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech.
So Georgia Tech, okay, here's who they played this season. Georgia Tech started the year in Ireland, beating Florida State. They got the Franimal in their first ACC road game in a close losing effort. They get the final year of Mac Brown. They get the national runners-up in Notre Dame. They get the best offense in America, it seems, in Mario Cristobal and Cam Ward in Miami, and hold them down with a two-quarterback situation in which their starting quarterback couldn't throw the ball because he had a wounded shoulder.
Couldn't throw the ball.
And then they go to, fact check me if you need to, 8 overtimes against their rival in Georgia on the road in one of the most insane, was that a Friday night game, I want to say, rivalry weekend? And then they get Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt in a losing effort in their bowl season. And obviously, Diego and Vandy, one of these stories of the 2024 season. They were everywhere, man. Georgia Tech. TV show.
All right. Why don't we leave it there, Dan?
Okay.
Unless you've got some other ones you want to go through rapid fire.
Do I? I think I might have one more. I have the latex salesman. I think that's all I have left here. The latex salesman award.
That's right.
Just near the end of the season, there was a lot of noise and commotion about, like, how is this a playoff without Alabama and what they've done and who they've beaten? How is this a playoff without Ole Miss and the number 2 scoring defense and this explosive offense? And Ole Miss loses to Kentucky, Alabama loses to Oklahoma in the fashion that they lose to, and those teams that they lost to, and you want to be my playoff teams, I give the award to both of those teams in the SEC. The latex salesman, a Seinfeld reference to those two teams. Like, how dare you want to be my playoff teams, putting forth the effort against those teams? How dare you, sirs? So they get that award. And I think that's everything. I think that's everything I wrote down in my ridiculous Roundtable Pizza Awards banquet.
Man, I'm still watching Robbie Amell throwing this football.
It's a tough breakdown.
It's
all
I
wrist.
don't know how you don't hurt your arm throwing like that. He's like throwing a screwball somehow with the football.
Well, he's like kind of if a paper airplane were shaped like a football. It's kind of how you would throw a paper airplane. So if you were...
It's so bad.
If you were on a balcony and you wrote a note and turned that note into a paper airplane and were throwing it down to somebody in a courtyard, that's how he's throwing the football.
I don't know how you don't tear your rotator cuff like this.
Yeah.
Good hell.
Yeah.
On that note, another installment of the Verbies now in the books. Longer show than usual today, but had a lot to get off our chest. Don't forget to hit follow, hit subscribe. If you made it this far, In for a dime, in for a dollar, man. You made it.
Yes.
Pretty deep into this show, like 90 minutes or so. Why don't you hit follow so that you don't miss any of our episodes? We're going to be coming your way all off season long. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. We do appreciate it. If you really like what Dan and I do, you want to further help us keep the lights on, going out to verballers.com, VERBALLERS.com. That's where you get access to the ad-free episodes, the bonus content, our Discord server, our community, so on and so forth. Would encourage you all to check that out if you like what we do. We'll be back on Thursday. We've got a whole off season of stuff here to discuss. Dan and I are still kind of trying to figure out what we're doing next and when we're doing it, but we will, alas, have a show for you on Thursday. In the meantime, for that guy over there, for myself, Ty Hildenbrand, thank you, as always, for downloading, for listening, for supporting. We will talk to you all soon. Stay solid.
Peace.